in our high school accounting, the booster club funds are in a standalone account. We have an athletic fund where ticket fund, dollars from tickets go into an athletic fund, and then booster club funds are in an account that stand alone. I'm going to use baseball as an example because I think they are a good example of how the bookkeeper reconciles with the treasurer of the baseball booster. So when your fundraiser takes place or you raise money, your treasurer reconciles the numbers with the dollars and turns it into the bookkeeper at the high school, and the bookkeeper then deposits it after reconciling it, and then based on a schedule that the bookkeeper and the baseball booster treasurer works out, they then reconcile and have been down to the penny. But the baseball boosters have one of the finest treasurers that we've ever worked with, and it's been down to the penny. I want to share with you how most of this started from my perspective. I came here in 2005. What I thought was a very good thing happened in 2006. The president of the football boosters, Derek Strange, called me and said, we want to recognize our football coach by giving him a trip to Hawaii. And do you have any problem with that? I said, absolutely not. Just make sure the Booster Club folks vote on it. It turned out that Coach Barton, he knew nothing about it. It turned out to be a great surprise. And it was a great thing, great night, as I remember. It was all the people holding up 100 signs. And they gave him a great trip. 2 complaints came out of that, major complaints. Most of them the school board members. One was that it wasn't a secret ballot. It wasn't a regular meeting. It was a call meeting. And people who actually, I believe, voted for it, because I think Mr. Trainer did, I believe he announced, said we felt like we didn't really have a chance to express ourselves because it wasn't a secret ballot. The second thing was that as a result of that vote, and I had no way of knowing this, and I don't know if Mr. Strange would have known it either, some of the assistant coaches complained because their bonuses that year were reduced. And they made it known that they didn't think that was right. Great trip, well-earned recognition, but the board got complaints. We began then, some questions started coming from Booster Club members. One of those questions was, we hear that the football coach has his dues paid at the country club. I got the questions, they got the questions, they actually asked me to find out. Not a big deal, nothing wrong with that. I think it's a good thing for the Booster Club to do that. They do it all over the place. But the question came, who's paying the taxes on it? That's somebody who's upset with the football coach that wants to know that, to be honest with you. But the reality is, we're in the business of trying to do things correctly. So we set up a policy which said, if you're going to pay bonuses and you're going to give an extra benefit, that's okay to do it as long as the Booster Club votes for it. It's just got to go through the school books and you got to pay taxes on it. And that was set up and it's been done since about 2007 or 2008. And everybody is happy. The bonuses, we have a Title IX issue with bonuses. You have to be fair to all sports. So the board said, make sure you come up with some kind of way where our coaches are treated fairly. They still can get bonuses. Make it kind of a merit system, but make it so that girls' athletics, should they get to the point where they're successful, also can receive the same kind of recognition. So we put in writing that any coach may receive up to $500 per round in the state playoffs, provided the Booster Club votes on it. And I think both baseball and football have that in their bylaws. And to my knowledge, that has worked very successfully. In fact, the Booster Club came and said, well, you know, you really don't get $500 when you run it through the books because there are federal taxes and other monies that are taken out, and we want them to have $500. So we worked it out, and our finance director computes and tells how much it takes to actually get $500, and then the booster club votes on it and actually pays the amount so they really realize the full $500. And once again, that allows not only those successful programs each year for the boosters to raise the money and make that decision, it also places them in a position when girls softball is successful, they can do the same thing, girls tennis, anybody else that wants to do it, and it's fair to everybody. Those are two reactions to situations that occurred as a result of booster club members not willing to give their name, but raising questions about their program. Now, one way to approach this is to turn your head on it and say, we're going to ignore it. But I tell you, personally, I have a problem with that. You expect us to teach your children the proper attitude, to reinforce a system of values, and I personally, and this board personally, and we've talked about it as a group, want to be consistent. If nobody brought it to their attention, probably nobody would have ever thought about it. But the fact is, somebody did bring it to their attention. 2 to 3 weeks ago, I received a call from someone who said they were a football booster and asked a question about the country club membership. I said, yeah, that happens, and it's been a good thing since 1997 or 8. As far as I know, everybody knows about it. Well, did you know we're no longer doing it, we're doing something else? I said, not really. I didn't know. There's no reason for me to know. Well, would you find out for me, because I think something else is being done? I said, well, yeah, I can find that out. Give me a name and I'll call you back. Of course, it had a number unavailable. No, I don't give you my name and number. I'll call you back. I go to Richard. Richard calls me as early. We find out that no, there is no more payment for the country club, which is fine. Paying for the cell phone bill, which is fine. So then I go back, and 2 or 3 days later, this guy calls me back, and I said, "You're correct. Didn't know it, but I'm sure the Boost Club knows it. It's fine with us. They're paying the monthly bill for his cell phone." Well, how much is it? Well, I didn't ask how much it was. And I said, well, I don't know. So I'll call you back. So I did find out. And it's the first bill was retroactive. It was, I don't know, $600 or $700, I think, going back several months. And the rest, about $100 a month, about like probably what yours is. Not a problem with it. So I tell this guy. Then he wants to know, and I finally got sick of it, he wants to know, is the Booster Club paying for his family plan? I said, you go ask the Booster Club. I'm not doing your errands anymore. I point out, I don't even tell you, there's a lot of people that the lack of communication, there's nothing wrong with any of this. You just got to be upfront with it and tell people. And I think there's so many people talking about different things, there's a lot of confusion. And this board, and certainly I don't care, if the Booster Club wants to pay, all you have to do is make sure it runs through the proper channels. Now, the next question somebody's going to say is, what about cell phone? You don't pay taxes on a cell phone. That's a legitimate use, and IRS rules do not require you to do that. Another example, which I feel very strongly about, is one Mr. Chaser mentioned. Last year, we had a coach, it went beyond what Mr. Chaser said. He was accused of taking 10% kickback from every order. And I sat, and Ms. Benton sat in a room with the individual who made the accusation. And we said, prove it. And most of you probably heard it. And we did as much due diligence as we could to make sure, asking the right questions, and we know that this individual was falsely accused. So the board says, how in the world are we going to protect our employees, who, by the way, in the last 8 years have spent $595,000, basically with 2 sports, with 1 vendor? How are we going to protect our employees from those kinds of accusations? I said, the only way to do it is to bid it. And what we're talking about for the most part is not booster money. Football money for equipment is money that belongs totally to the school board because it's from ticket sales. Now, baseball is a little different because they make more money through fundraising. But football, for the most part, all the equipment is purchased through dollars that go through Joy Early and Jay Floyd. And so I brought a policy to require bidding. And frankly, I faced a lot of resistance, even though I stood side by side to defend people who were falsely accused in my judgment. But sometimes you need to protect people from themselves. And I see that as my responsibility to make sure. And when some of you come and say, we're spending this amount of money for this, and I can get it for this protects you from that. And so it looks like the superintendent and school board are micromanaging, when in fact what we're attempting to do is put policies in place that protect our employees. And the last example I want to give, and I've already said, I've said it to his face, I've said it in writing, and I'll say it again. In 2 years I've observed the baseball treasurer, who is one of the finest treasurers I have ever seen in a volunteer organization. Joy Early, who is one of the finest bookkeepers I've ever worked with, will tell you that baseball's treasurer had every penny documented, and every single thing that dollar he was presented with, along with whatever information he was given, he had it down to the penny. Once again, somebody called, and they called board members, and they called me and complained that their children were not getting to work as a part of the Dugout Club's summer work program through Perfect Game. That they felt that priority had been given to certain individuals. This began to turn into an issue of people being paid more than what the $600 IRS threshold is. There are people who would argue that the school board shouldn't have anything to do with that. The problem with that is that the Dugout Club and football boosters, any way you want to look at it, are an arm of the school system, really the school. And those people who complained said, we want you to check that out. I went to the man that I knew who knew the answer. I called Phil Bridges. He told me, yes, that is true. I said, that's going to be a problem for us because it exceeds the $600. I'm not in a position to turn my head on that. Because you know what, the person or persons who were contacting us and giving us the grief about it, they're not going to drop it. And then if somebody turns the school system into the IRS for not doing it, you can ask Mr. Dyke what the potential consequences of that are. They are horrendous, the kind of audit we have to go through over something really relatively minor. So, Mr. Bridges sent a letter to the people along with the W-9 requesting that they please fill out the W-9 so the 1099s could be issued at the proper time. And to this day, we've received no W-9s. I even went back to the school board and said, you want me to turn my head on that? These people probably didn't know there was going to be a 1099 issue. Do we want to forget that? I don't recommend you do that because that's not consistent with our core values. And it was unanimous. No, we don't want to do that. In fact, some of you talked to school board members, they told you the same thing. And to the treasurer's credit, he documented. I even went to him and said, let's figure out a way. Is there some travel involved? Is there some way we can reduce that amount to soften the burden? And he worked with at least one of those people to try to do that. Yet I know for a fact, because some of you called me and said, they're criticizing the school board, criticizing you right and left, because we have placed a hardship on these people because we don't issue a 1099. So that's just several examples of what I think is relatively big things, to try to be more transparent. I do believe from in the last 2 weeks, I've heard some points that have been brought to my attention by board members that some of you have brought up that I had no idea what we're talking about, that really should go to the school. You should go ask Jay Floyd or you should ask Dr. Bradley. The school board does not, for example, the school board does not tell people how to get something paid for. They just have a process in place. For example, Mr. Bridges came to me at some point and said, how are we going to take care of getting baseball players going down to say, Columbus? We wrote a check, they cashed it, They paid for the meals, they got receipts, they brought the receipts back, and they brought the difference in the cash back. It's all reconciled. Joy Early reconciles it to the penny. There are ways that sometimes people try to avoid that kind of documentation because it's a little more cumbersome. But it keeps people from being accused of something that they can't defend. Not that they did anything wrong, but they can't defend it. And so, historically, as Mr. Chasen has said, this is my 43rd year, my 22nd year as superintendent. I've had to fire administrators because they took money out of the petty cash to take their wife out to eat and forgot to put it back. That is a no-no. In our profession, that is a violation of ethics. So I am very conscious of trying to make sure we have things in place without being too cumbersome. So what we want to do, and let me, my closing comments, what I think we should do, and the board thinks we should do, is that we put together a survey, and we're going to put it on our website. It's going to be up Friday. We'll do a connect in to remind you. And you go on that website and you tell us all the problems that you're occurring, all the special recommendations you got to make these things better. If you got some horror stories that you've experienced, we'll have that information. We'll compile it. We did this three years ago with our teachers. We got 600 inputs, and we used a number of those. And I'm proud to say, you go ask most teachers, they'll tell you this place is well run, this place is financially stable, and they're proud of the fact that we don't furlough and every kid's going to school 180 days. And that's because we listen to the people, and to our teachers and to our employees, and we made some significant changes in the way we were doing work to be more efficient, and we saved money, and as a result of that, we're on pretty good financial grounds along with some other things that we've done. But we want your input. We're going to give you 2 weeks. If you're like me and not that technologically literate, you sit down and write it down, stick it in the mail, put it to my attention. If you want to put your name on it, that's fine. If you don't want to put your name on it, that's okay too. We're interested in what your input is. We will compile it. Anybody wants to see it will be able to see it, and our board members will get copies of it, and then we'll take a look at what we need to do in relationship to what the person's coming in to look at processes. I want to emphasize to you, it's a process review. Are we doing things correctly as it relates to handling cash? Are we doing things correctly as it relates to doing business in relation to the policies? And if we're not, all we want to do is make the necessary improvements so that those of you who work hard and give your money, help raise money, can feel confident that that money is being spent the way you want it to be spent and is totally accounted for. Whether you believe it or not, within your ranks, there are people asking questions. It's just like anything else. I grew up in a town of 1,500. There are questions, but people don't want to put their name with the question. I understand that. But that doesn't mean you've got to close your ears to it. And so over time, we've had these different feedbacks, and I believe, going back to the football example, I believe that there was a good model in place. Never heard one complaint from Mr. Strange or anybody about that process. I just believe that for Coach Barton's sake, it would have been better had a little different process taken place, but it was all done in the effort to try to make sure it was a surprise. And as a result, some people complained. Some very people that voted for it. And so I appreciate you being here tonight. I hope you will let us know what your concerns are. And I hope to some degree we've explained to you kind of the chronology of what we're attempting to do here. And also to emphasize to you that Richard Dyke, who's our finance officer, and myself are in the ballgame of looking at the big picture, the policies that protect people, so that when auditors come in, and our auditors are here now, they're going to be looking at things, and they're going to be asking questions, and we've gotten hit a couple times on some issues. And so we don't want that to continue. The smaller issues about the detail that happens in the school, you need to go to Mr. Floyd and go to Dr. Bradley. on those. And if you don't get the answer, or you don't like the answer, you come to me. And I'll be perfectly honest with you. And if we're wrong, I'll change it.